I don't know what Megalodon is, but however I can talk about Megalodon. The Megalodon is extinct. Here's why. Megalodon is actually the species name, not the genus. The genus name is actually a mystery, and scientists have speculated that it could be any one of these four. The name Megalodon means giant tooth, and I really don't think I need to explain why. And speaking of the teeth, that's actually all we really have of Megalodon fossils. Since Megalodon was a cartilaginous fish, that means it didn't really have any bones, so therefore it kind of makes figuring out what kind of shark it was, and even its size, a challenge. Males could probably get around 34 to 47 feet long, and females could probably get 44 to 56 feet long. In terms of weight, the males could probably weigh around 13.9 to 37.4 tons, and females could get around 30.2 to 65.5 tons. Again, pretty huge estimate gap. That's kind of what happens when you don't have a skeleton to work with. But if these estimates were to hold true, that would effectively make Megalodon the largest fish in history. And yes, that would mean it would be heavier than Leedzichthys. And Megalodon fossils have been generally found pretty much all over the world. But let's get to the meat of the question. Why do people think Megalodon is still alive? Well, one of the reasons was because in 2014, Shark Week released a documentary called Megalodon: The Monster Shark Lives. It used very fabricated pseudoscience to try to explain, hey, the Megalodon could be still alive, even going so far as to fabricate photos with supposed whales that were chopped in half. And seriously, come on, you know that's CGI. The lighting's all weird. Notice how there's no blood whatsoever, it's just a dried up carcass. And there's not even any seagulls or anything to try to pick off the flesh or anything like that. Like, there's no scavengers. And this wasn't even the first time Discovery Communications did this. They literally aired a misleading mermaid documentary a year later on Animal Planet. And surprise, surprise, both specials became the most viewed programs in Animal Planet and Discovery Channel's history. Luckily, in more recent years, Discovery Communications has stopped doing this, but the damage is still done. Problem number 2, social media misinformation. A bunch of dumb idiot YouTube channels started posting videos on why Megalodon is still alive, and notice how they rack up tons of views. Because yeah, a giant prehistoric shark still living sounds interesting. But surely social media and misinformation couldn't possibly get worse, could it? Also, Megalodon couldn't even live in the Mariana Trench. Megalodon lived between 23 to 3.6 million years ago, and you know what's kind of funny about that? It went extinct right before the Ice Age. Megalodon was not well adapted for the cold, it lived closer to the surface of the ocean where its prey was. So do you really think it could live in a deep, dark, cold trench like this? And here's the strongest evidence as for why Megalodon went extinct. The giant squid! We've at least found washed up bodies of the giant squid to prove that it's still living. What other extinct animal should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. Thank goodness the angry beavers didn't take place 11,000 years ago. Because then we as kids would have had to deal with 2 angry Castoroides. And this video is not clickbait, Castoroides was literally the size of a bear. More specifically, Castoroides could max out a length of 7.2 feet and weigh up to 276 pounds. And just to add to the nightmare fuel, here's a Castoroides skull compared to a modern beaver's skull. There's currently no evidence to suggest that Castoroides built dams like modern beavers, although really with teeth like these, and really with the size that it had, did it really need to? Even modern beavers have been known to kill people, so like, what do you think you're gonna do against Castoroides? But really, if you see a beaver, just leave it be, it's not worth it. Castoroides lived around 3 million years ago and probably went extinct around 11,000 years ago, and they mainly lived around the Great Lakes area of the United States and Canada. And while I wouldn't say it's impossible, there's currently no evidence to suggest that humans hunted Castoroides. I definitely know I wouldn't take my chances. But what's really interesting is that even though Castoroides overall was bigger than modern beavers, it still had a proportionately smaller brain. Then again, when you're this big, do you really need to be smart? Follow me if you want to see more prehistoric animal facts, and let me know what other prehistoric creatures you want to see in the next video. Remember that evil turtle from The Amazing World of Gumball? Yeah, that was a soft-shelled turtle, and I can actually tell you from experience they are just as mean as they seem. Oh, but it gets worse! Meet Drazenduretes, the giant soft-shelled turtle. It lived in Pakistan around 38 million years ago. And here's what's even scarier. There's a chance that it may have gotten bigger. And the crazy thing about Drazenduretes is that it wasn't just like an ancient relative of soft-shelled turtles, it was a genus of soft-shelled turtle. Now, I've seen some people say that if it got to this size, then it may have been one of the largest turtles in existence. I have my doubts, though. Because yes, in terms of length, it may have been one of the longest turtles ever to live. But in terms of weight, you also have to keep in mind that this is a soft-shell turtle. The reason why I say this is because since the soft-shell turtle, has a soft shell, that means it's lighter and able to move a lot quicker than other turtles. And keep in mind, I haven't really heard any weight estimates about this animal yet, but at least judging from what I'm seeing right here, it would have a hard time being heavier than the leatherback sea turtle, which can already weigh 3/4 of a ton. Since, leatherback sea turtles actually have hard shells. And you could just forget about it being heavier than Archelon, because Archelon is literally the largest turtle to ever live, weighing 2.4 tons. Regardless, even if it's not as big as Archelon or even the leatherback sea turtle, Dresdentoides is still a very fascinating turtle. So really, Gumball actually got off pretty easy. What are the prehistoric creatures do you want me to talk about? Hit that follow button and leave me a suggestion in the comments below. Or in the side. I don't really know how TikTok works.
Extinct Dunkleosteus was technically a fish, so you might be able to accurately describe it.
As funny as that meme was, the pronunciation of that is completely wrong on every level possible. This is actually pronounced Dunkleosteus. The reason why I say this is because the name means Dunkel's bone. What's a dunkel, you may ask? That's because it was named after a paleontologist named David Dunkel. And no, I'm not gonna pretend like a guy who looks like this with the last name Dunkel isn't hilarious. Dunkleosteus lived between 382 to 358 million years ago, and fossils have been found in the United States and Europe. But to be clear, that's the Torelli species of Dunkleosteus, because there have been other species of Dunkleosteus that have been found in other places around the world, like Morocco. Dunkleosteus could get anywhere between 24 and 35 feet long and weigh nearly 4.5 tons. You're looking at it correctly. This is a heavily armored fish. It was literally, a lot of its skull is just bone. So much so to where that's not even teeth. Those are actual bone shards. And the way this thing probably hunted is probably even scarier. Scientists have studied the way Dunkleosteus's jaws moved and discovered that it could have probably moved its jaws so fast to where it could literally suck in prey. A lot of modern fish do this too. And keep in mind, it had those bone shards that were an excuse for teeth, so that means you'd be cut in half before you even realized what happened. And to make matters worse, it's possible that Dunkleosteus had lips, which means you would have seen it going, and then you wouldn't know what happened next because it sucked you in and chopped you in half so quick. Dunkleosteus was a placoderm, and placoderms are an extinct group of fish that had heavy bone armored covering. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. So make sure you hit that follow button because these future videos are coming your way. I'm shocked people don't talk about Platybelodon more. Platybelodon lived in Africa and Asia between 15 and 10 million years ago. Platybelodon wasn't as big as modern elephants either, weighing only 2.7 tons. And funny enough, Platybelodon wasn't even a true elephant, as the branch-off point between it and elephants broke apart pretty early on, as you can see right here. Platybelodon's signature feature was its lower jaw, which extended to create a shovel-like shape. Initially, it was assumed that it used its lower jaw for scooping up water plants. And while that's still not unlikely, wear marks on its lower jaw's tusks show that Platybelodon may have stripped the bark from trees. What other extinct animal should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. So be sure you hit that follow button because these future videos are coming your way pretty soon. Yeah, this is Gigantopithecus, the largest primate to ever live. And when I say it was big, I mean it was big. If it were standing on 2 legs, it could reach up to 10 feet tall and weighed over 1,000 pounds. And for all you normies out there, that's half a ton. But there's a bit of an asterisk there because, like most great apes, Gigantopithecus most likely just walked on 4 legs most of the time. But don't let that discourage you, this thing was still gigantic. And even though Gigantopithecus was bigger than a gorilla, its closest living relatives are actually orangutans. Earliest fossils of Gigantopithecus date back 2 million years ago, and it's likely that it went extinct around 300,000 years ago. Yeah, that tiger better run. Its fossil remains have been found in China, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. And before anyone tries to say anything, no, Gigantopithecus was not the Bigfoot or Yeti. Reason being is that the Bigfoot and Yeti are said to be more human-like than other apes. They're bipedal, meaning they walk on 2 legs. And really, there's no solid evidence of their existence, not even any fossils. Whereas with Gigantopithecus, it was abundantly clear that it was a great ape. It was mostly a quadruped, and we actually have fossil evidence. I just felt like I needed to get that out there. And here's where my movie knowledge comes into play here. We all know that Jungle Book remake that came out in 2016. I certainly loved it. Or should I say, the Academy Award winning The Jungle Book? I mean, seriously, the Best Visual Effects Oscar was very well deserved here. Well, if you know the original Jungle Book, you probably know this character named King Louie. He was an orangutan. And when making the Jungle Book, director Jon Favreau realized, oh wait, orangutans actually don't live in India. So the search was on to find a great ape that lived in India. Because clearly a movie about a kid who can talk to animals being raised by wolves in the jungle with unpredictable weather conditions is clearly not being realistic enough. I kid. So yeah, what great ape did live in India? Turns out a species of Gigantopithecus actually did live in India. However, it was actually the significantly smaller version, which is kind of ironic because the King Louie we got in that version of the Jungle Book was gigantic. And if you want to see how big this thing was supposed to be, here he is compared to his voice actor, Christopher Walken. Even the bigger species of Gigantopithecus didn't get this big. But luck is a cruel mistress. Because it turns out that that specific species of Gigantopithecus that was said to live in India was likely not even Gigantopithecus. And it's being more widely accepted that its name was Indopithecus. Foiled again. In summary, even though Gigantopithecus was the biggest ape, he's still not king of the apes. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And just as a little tease, here are some future videos on the way. So hit that follow button and you'll be notified. Here's a little story on how Thomas Jefferson named a giant ground sloth. But first, let's get into the science. What is a ground sloth? Sloths belong to the order Plyosa, meaning they are related to anteaters, like the giant anteater, the silky anteater, and the tamandua. Fun fact, the two-toed sloth and the three-toed sloths evolved independently. The two-toed sloth and the three-toed sloth are, at least so far to what we know, the only tree-dwelling sloths. All the others were ground sloths. And if you look carefully, the ancestor of the two-toed sloth and the ancestor of the three-toed sloth actually branched out pretty early on. Meaning it was just an act of convergent evolution that caused these two different genuses of sloth to dwell and live in the trees. And as cute as modern sloths can be, the ground sloths were something else entirely. They lived from 35 million years ago and went extinct around 5,000 years ago. They first evolved around here in South America, but eventually, once South America and North America merged together, they started migrating up to North America, where we got even more ground sloth species. And they were diverse as hell. Most ground sloths actually used their long arms and huge claws to bring down branches of vegetation to eat. However, they weren't picky because some ground sloths have been theorized to have been scavengers. And while I don't think there's any evidence to say that they were active hunters, all I'm saying is that would anything try to stop them? It's even been recently theorized that giant ground sloths may have been hairless, which makes sense considering they evolved in a more tropical environment, so why would they need a bunch of hair? There was even a genus of aquatic ground sloth, and I'm actually going to save that for a future video because this is interesting all on its own. The biggest ground sloth was Megatherium, and it was massive. It could grow up to 20 feet long and weigh nearly 4.5 tons. And here we have the main subject of this video, Megalonyx jeffersoni. And the remarkable thing about Megalonyx wasn't its size. It was one of, if not the first, ground sloth discovered in North America. Although if I am wrong, some paleontologists out there, if you're watching this, correct me on that. However, the really remarkable thing about Megalonyx was that its first remains that were discovered were sent to future president and Hamilton star Thomas Jefferson, who named it afterwards. And to make matters more interesting is that the first Megalonyx fossils were actually discovered in what would become West Virginia, which is my home state. And fun fact, Megalonyx even inspired the Megasloths in Fallout 76, which just so happened to take place in West Virginia. So yeah, among West Virginia's embarrassments, we at least have a ground sloth. Although maybe I'm being a bit too optimistic, because Thomas Jefferson still did own slaves. Ugh. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And be sure to hit that follow button because you'll see these future videos. Let's talk about Mosasaurus, shall we? Mosasaurs were an extinct group of marine reptiles that lived between 101 to 66 million years ago. Their closest living relatives are the monitor lizards, which include the Asian water monitor and the Komodo dragon, and yes, that is a Komodo dragon taking down a goat. There are over 41 genera of mosasaur that are known, and that doesn't even count the species number. While most mosasaurs were marine reptiles, some like Plyosaurus lived in fresh water. Meaning no matter where you go, being near water is just pretty much a death sentence. Also, fun fact, no mosasaur was this huge. Although scientific inaccuracies are literally the last things the Jurassic World franchise needs to worry about. The largest mosasaur was Mosasaurus hoffmanni, which could grow up to 56 feet in length. And the smallest was Dilophosaurus, which was easily strangle-sized at only a meter in length. Strangely enough, Jurassic World actually got the teeth on the roof of the mosasaur's mouth correct. Also, random fun fact, evidence shows that mosasaurs may have actually given birth. Which makes sense, because how is a reptile going to lay eggs in the water? And it surely can't climb up on land. And fun fact number 2, we actually know the color of some mosasaurs. In 2014, scientists studied the melanin in the fossilized scales of a mosasaur and discovered that they may have been countershaded. Countershading is a color pattern many marine predators have, where their stomachs match the sunny ocean surface from below and their backs match the ocean depths from above. What other extinct animal should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And be sure you hit that follow button because these future videos are coming your way. Yeah, this one's gonna be kinda sad. The passenger pigeon is a species of pigeon that went extinct, honestly, a little over 100 years ago. That's so recent to where some museums actually have stuffed passenger pigeons on display. There was once a time where the passenger pigeon was spread all throughout eastern North America. And there were flocks of passenger pigeons as far as the eye could see. But as with many animals back in the day, passenger pigeons were commonly hunted. At first, it wasn't that bad, because it was Native Americans that were initially hunting the passenger pigeon, and that was a lot more sustainable for the species because, the Native Americans didn't really have access to modern technology. I think you know where this is going. Enter white people. Once the Europeans settled in North America, things only got worse for the passenger pigeon, because unlike Native Americans, the Europeans had access to guns. And having guns meant that they could kill passenger pigeons way more effectively and way quicker. And I'm not even kidding. Like, it was surprisingly easy to kill passenger pigeons. They weren't even considered game bird because all you had to do was just aim up at the sky and then, oh, look, you would just kill at least a few of them. Yeah, you didn't even have to try that hard to kill the passenger pigeon. Eventually, the passenger pigeon's numbers dwindled significantly. And that's where we get Martha, the last passenger pigeon. On September 1st, 1914, Martha was found dead at the bottom of her cage in the Cincinnati Zoo. And while it may be too late to save this species, that's why I endorse donating to Wildlife Warriors. I have the link right here, because sadly TikTok does not have a donation button for this charity. What other extinct animal should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. Hit that follow button and you'll see these future videos in your feed. This is Pyroraptor Olympias. I did this by request, and ironically enough, I know next to nothing about Pyroraptor. What I do know is that fossils have been found in France and Spain. Not much is really that well known about Pyroraptor. Like, maybe it was 4.5 feet long, but even then, it seems like scientists aren't really that conclusive on that. If it were that size, that would mean it was smaller than Velociraptor. But yeah, other than that, there's not really much known about Pyroraptor. I legit tried looking for information, and there wasn't much there at all. Which is kind of ironic considering that it was featured in the miniseries Dinosaur Planet, and it's going to be featured in Jurassic World Dominion. And what's even weirder is that both portrayals gave this creature a red feather covering. But yeah, other than that, I'm kind of stumped. There's not much information I could find about this creature, so there's not really much content I can have for this TikTok. But yeah, it's gonna be in Jurassic World Dominion, so, I guess that's a thing. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And hit that follow button because I'm gonna be talking about these creatures pretty soon. Yeah, this is Katsucuales, the largest animal to ever fly. Before I go on, I should probably also mention that pterosaurs are not dinosaurs. They are related to them, but they aren't really dinosaurs. It's sort of like how chimpanzees are related to humans, but they're not humans. Basically, the same principle applies here. The first remains of Katsucuales were discovered in Texas, and soon afterwards they started popping up all over the United States. And when I said that it was the largest animal to ever fly, I wasn't kidding around. It had a wingspan of, at minimum, 36 feet wide and could weigh around 440 to 550 pounds. Now granted, you may think that's light for an animal as tall as a giraffe, and you would be correct. An animal like Katsucuales would need to be light in order to be able to fly. Oh yeah, don't think that just because this thing was gigantic doesn't mean it couldn't fly, because it was fully capable of powered flight. And that begs the question, what in the world did this thing eat? Well, it had a beak or a bill, I'm not exactly sure what I would call this, that was not only very long but also very pointy despite having no teeth. If I were to make a guess, I'd say it probably lived like a gigantic marabou stork, scavenging the remains of animals that were already dead, and knowing fully well how big it was so it could violently take down prey. Oh, wait, that explains this model's coloration. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. This thing right here is Helicoprion, commonly known as the buzzsaw shark. But there's a reason why I have shark up in quotes here. It's because despite Helicoprion being related to sharks, it wasn't actually a shark per se. It lived between 290 to 270 million years ago during the Permian period, which means this thing predated dinosaurs. Fossils have been found in Russia, Laos, China, Kazakhstan, Australia, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Helicoprion's size has been debated as to being anywhere between 16.4 feet or 37 feet in length. You're probably thinking, that's a really wide gap for length estimates, and you would be correct. Because really, for the most part, the only fossils that have been found of Helicoprion have been its lower jaw, because, since it was a cartilaginous fish, it didn't really have any bones. So that means it was either scary-sized or really scary-sized. Speaking of its jaws, let's talk about that for a bit. Because, good God, this has one of the weirdest paleontology stories you can imagine. One of the reconstructions you might be familiar with is this one, and even though this isn't accurate anymore, it's still more safe to assume than some of the other crazier reconstructions that have been made about Helicoprion. That toothy spiral has been debated as to whether it's been a snout, a dorsal fin, a tail. I mean, at least at some point we got to the mouth. And so it's very safe to assume that this is what it would have looked like in life. I mean, despite maybe the coloration. I mean, obviously that's going to be something that no one's going to know. Or maybe we might in the future, who knows? But that begs the question, what did it use those teeth for, and why were they spiraled that way? It's been theorized that Helicoprion used its spiral-like teeth in a motion like this to grind up crustaceans or mollusks or really anything that would need teeth like this to get through. Because even though it didn't have any top teeth, Helicoprion still had this big bony surface on the top of its mouth, or maybe it was a tooth, I'm not exactly sure. But again, when looking at the lower jaws and lower teeth, and that grinding up against the top of its mouth, that would put the life out of any crustacean or mollusk. Did I just say put the life out of? What am I even talking about? Either way, sometimes extinction is a blessing in disguise. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. Walking with Dinosaurs lied to you all. In case you don't know, this is Liopleurodon, or as unicorns pronounce it, Leopleurodon. Despite being in a show called Walking with Dinosaurs, Liopleurodon was actually not a dinosaur at all. It was a pliosaur from the Jurassic period. And Liopleurodon also lived in Europe. The reason why I said Walking with Dinosaurs lied to you about Liopleurodon was that they claimed that this was an 82-foot-long super predator. Sounds awesome, right? Yeah, it wasn't even a quarter of that size. I don't know how you get from 21 feet long to 82 feet long, but yeah, that happened. The largest pliosaur on record so far is Plyosaurus funki, or is it funky? I don't know. I don't know Latin. Or is it Greek? And at max, Plyosaurus funki could get around 39 feet long. That's not even half the size of the mega super predator that Walking with Dinosaurs portrayed. But it could be worse. You could be the recently released Jurassic World Evolution 2 and completely miss the mark in how this thing is supposed to be designed. Like, seriously, they took a pliosaur and they made it look like a crocodilian, which, to be clear, it wasn't anything close to a crocodilian. Say what you will about the size, but at least Walking with Dinosaurs got the shape of the animal right. What other extinct prehistoric creatures should I talk about next? Let me know in the comments, and I'll probably get to it. Gee, I bet you've never heard of Stegosaurus before. Stegosaurus lived in what is now the United States and Portugal around 155 to 145 million years ago. And fun fact, this is what scientists actually thought Stegosaurus looked like when it was first discovered. In reality, Stegosaurus looked more so like this, and there are actually 3 Stegosaurus species: Stegosaurus stenops, Stegosaurus ungulatus, and Stegosaurus sulcatus. The largest species was Stegosaurus ungulatus. It could grow up to nearly 30 feet long and weigh over 5.5 tons. But despite its huge size, Stegosaurus had the smallest brain in proportion to its body size out of almost any dinosaur. Almost. It was even once theorized that Stegosaurus had a second brain in its hip just to function properly. Nowadays, that theory has been discredited, but scientists are still unsure as to what exactly it was, with guesses ranging from a clump of nerves to a structure that pumped glycogen through its body. But if you can't be smart, then at least be well-armed. Ew. And well-armed it was. Stegosaurus had a thagomizer, which was basically 4 baseball bat-sized spikes at the end of its tail, and, yeah, you wouldn't really want to be the receiving end of that. And despite being the most famous aspect of Stegosaurus, no one really knows what the backplates were used for. Some discredited / highly questioned theories included armor, heat regulation, and blood pumping threat displays. The latter 2 wouldn't really make sense because the plates were actually made out of bone, not skin. And so therefore, blood vessels couldn't really be pumped through those. And so if all else fails, scientists pretty much say if you can't figure out what it was used for, it was probably used for display. Story time. You see, when I was in elementary school, it was Valentine's Day, and, you know, if you, I don't know, maybe you kids did this when you were in elementary school, but we had to, like, make Valentines for, like, the entire class, and, like, it had to be the entire class. Problem is that there was this kid in my class who used to bully me, and so I didn't want to give him a Valentine, but I had to anyway. So I started thinking, how do I get around this? And since that year I had dinosaur Valentine's Day cards, I figured, hey, why don't I give my mortal enemy the Stegosaurus Valentine's Day card? Because Stegosaurus had the smallest brain out of any dinosaur, and so by that logic, I'm calling him stupid, without actually calling him stupid. Long story short, Valentine's Day came and went, and I thought I was the most clever kid in the world for making that joke. What other extinct animals do you want me to cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And be sure to hit that follow button because these future videos are coming your way. Today, we're going to talk about Steller sea cow. Steller sea cow was a marine herbivore around so recently that it went extinct in 1768, merely 8 years before the United States was created. That's like a major large species going extinct while you're watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then 8 years later a new country is created while you're watching Andrew's Return and Spider-Man No Way Home on 4K Blu-ray. Steller sea cow was huge, growing up to 9 meters or 30 feet in length and weighing up to 11 short tons. Steller sea cow was a member of the order Sirenia, which includes dugongs and manatees. What's weirder is that Sirenians' closest living relatives are elephants. But unlike elephants, which can and will wreck your shit, Steller sea cow was completely harmless despite its size. But that was precisely the problem. The combination of the blubber of Steller sea cow being around 3 to 4 inches thick, the creatures themselves having so much meat, accompanied by the fact that they weren't really that dangerous, meant that they were easy, abundant prey for humans. And as a little side note, the blubber from Steller sea cow was so thick that the creature couldn't even submerge underwater, like they literally just floated on the surface. And to make things even more depressing, Steller sea cow was reportedly a very social animal, where when one would get harpooned by a human, all the others would try to help and assist it in any way they could. And to make up for that sadness, and the sadness going on in the world right now, here are some baby manatees. What other extinct animals should I cover next? Let me know in the comments and I'll probably get to it. And be sure you hit that follow button because these future videos are coming your way pretty soon.